I never expected a simple surprise to change my life forever. But that's the thing about life-altering moments. They don't announce themselves with trumpets or warning signs. They just happen, sudden and sharp as a paper cut, except the pain doesn't fade after a few seconds. The journey started with such good intentions. After 3 years of marriage to Mark, I thought I knew what to expect. His schedule as a financial advisor meant long hours and frequent weekend retreats with clients or colleagues. This particular trip was supposed to be a guy's weekend at our favorite cabin in the Poconos. Just Mark and his college buddy Dave unwinding, fishing and probably drinking too much beer. Nothing unusual. You should take that teaching conference in San Diego, Mark had suggested 2 weeks earlier. It'll be good for your career. We'll both be busy, so neither of us will be sitting home alone. The conference had been informative but cut short when the keynote speaker fell ill. With suddenly free days ahead, I'd hatched my brilliant surprise plan. Mark always complained I was too predictable, too structured. Well, this would show him I could be spontaneous too. The flight from San Diego was my first mistake. Who books a red-eye thinking it's a good idea? The airplane cabin lights dimmed shortly after takeoff, but sleep proved impossible. A baby 3 rows back screamed with impressive lung capacity, while my seatmate, Gladys, showed me pictures of all 8 grandchildren on her phone. Twice. This one's Timmy. He's in the gifted program, you know, she said for the 3rd time, pointing at a gap-toothed boy holding a science fair trophy. That's wonderful, I replied automatically, the same response I'd given the previous times. When Gladys finally dozed off, the man across the aisle started snoring. The sound reminded me of Mark's grandfather's ancient chainsaw. I pressed my forehead against the cool window, watching clouds drift by in the moonlight, excited despite my exhaustion. Mark would be so surprised. We landed in Chicago at 5:15 a.m. My connecting flight wasn't until 7:30, but I didn't mind the layover. It gave me time to brush my teeth in the airport bathroom and grab a mediocre coffee that cost more than I'd spent on lunch the day before. The airport intercom crackled to life just as I settled into a seat near my gate. Attention passengers on Flight 2463 to Denver, there will be a delay due to weather conditions. New estimated departure time is 9:45 a.m. We apologize for any inconvenience. I sighed but didn't panic. I still had plenty of buffer time built into my journey. I called Emily, my sister, while I waited. "You're doing what?" she asked after I explained my surprise plan. "Showing up at the cabin. He'll be shocked." "Sarah, you hate surprises. Why would you think Mark loves them?" "He's always saying I'm too predictable," I replied, defensive. "Well," Emily hesitated, "just text me when you get there safely, okay? Those mountain roads can be tricky." 4 hours later, I finally boarded the plane to Denver, only to sit on the tarmac for another 40 minutes. The pilot's voice sounded genuinely apologetic when he announced the delay, but that didn't make the cramped seat any more comfortable or calm my growing anxiety about making my next connection. We landed in Denver 2 hours behind schedule. I hurried through the terminal, rollerboard suitcase bouncing wildly behind me, nearly taking out a display of Colorado souvenir mugs. My connecting gate was naturally at the opposite end of the airport. Final boarding call for Flight 887 to Salt Lake City, the intercom announced as I ran, out of breath and disheveled. I made it with seconds to spare, collapsing into my seat as the flight attendant closed the cabin door. This plane was smaller and my knees pressed uncomfortably against the seat in front of me. The businessman beside me frowned at my intrusion into his armrest territory, but I was too tired to care about airplane etiquette. We taxied to the runway and I closed my eyes, ready for the next leg of this increasingly exhausting journey. That's when the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Folks, I'm afraid I have some bad news. We've been asked to return to the gate due to a staffing issue. It seems our flight crew scheduled to work this route has been delayed on an incoming flight." The collective groan from passengers would have been comical if I hadn't been so frustrated. 2 hours later we finally took off. I dozed fitfully during the short flight, jerking awake whenever my head lolled too far to one side. Salt Lake City's airport was undergoing renovation, forcing us to deplane via stairs onto the tarmac and walk to a temporary terminal building. By the time I reached the rental car counter, my feet ached and a headache pulsed behind my right eye. "I have a reservation under Sarah Kelly," I told the tired-looking rental agent. He typed slowly, each keystroke seeming deliberately paced to maximize my impatience. I'm sorry, Ms. Kelly, but we don't have any mid-size vehicles available as requested. What do you have? I asked, too exhausted to argue. One compact car. It was just returned and hasn't been fully cleaned yet. 30 minutes later, I was driving a suspiciously stained Nissan Versa with a mysterious rattling sound coming from somewhere beneath the passenger seat. The GPS on my phone directed me away from the city and toward the mountains where our cabin waited. The sun began to set as I drove, painting the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks that reflected off the mountain peaks. Despite my exhaustion, the beauty momentarily lifted my spirits. This surprise would be worth all the trouble. Mark would be so impressed by my spontaneity. I stopped at a small gas station to refill the car and grab some snacks. The teenage clerk barely looked up from his phone as I paid for beef jerky and a large bottle of water. Is this the road to Pine Lake? I asked, pointing to the winding route on my phone. He glanced up. Yeah, but be careful after dark. No guardrails on the switchbacks. That information would have been more useful before twilight, but I thanked him anyway and returned to the car. The final stretch of my journey wound through increasingly remote territory. The rental car's headlights seemed pathetically inadequate against the enveloping darkness. Each curve revealed nothing but more trees and occasional reflective eyes watching from the underbrush. My hands cramped from gripping the steering wheel so tightly. The GPS lost signal twice, leaving me momentarily panicked before it reconnected. After what felt like hours of white-knuckling through the darkness, the cabin area finally came into view. This was our third time renting this particular cabin. It belonged to a chain of rustic retreats marketed to busy professionals wanting to disconnect and recharge. Mark had discovered it through a client and fallen in love with the location. The cabin itself was nothing special, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen and a great room with a stone fireplace, but the view of the lake was spectacular in daylight. I turned off my headlights as I approached, not wanting to announce my arrival. The clock on the dashboard read 11:37 p.m. Much later than I'd planned, but still, the surprise would be worth it. Mark's black Ford F-150 was parked next to Dave's recognizable red Jeep Wrangler with the dented fender. Good, they were both here as expected. I parked on the far side of the clearing and quietly closed the car door. Warm light spilled from the cabin windows and I could hear faint laughter. Mark always did have a distinctive laugh, a sort of staccato chuckle that rose in pitch at the end. Hearing it now made me smile despite my exhaustion. Moving carefully in the dark, I approached the cabin. The wooden porch steps were exactly as I remembered. The second one creaked loudly, so I stepped over it. Through the window I could see Mark and Dave sitting at the kitchen table, beer bottles between them, playing cards scattered across the surface. My plan was simple: knock on the door, yell, "Surprise!" and enjoy Mark's shocked expression. Maybe he'd sweep me into his arms like in those romantic movies we sometimes watched. I'd laugh about my travel mishaps, and we'd all have a good chuckle before Dave tactfully excused himself to give us some privacy. I raised my hand to knock but paused when I heard my name. Sarah would freak if she knew how much money we lost, Dave was saying. I froze, my knuckles inches from the wooden door. Mark's response made my blood run cold. She doesn't need to know. Besides, if she disappeared, her insurance could fix everything. The casual tone, the slight chuckle underlying his words. It was as if he were discussing the weather or a football score. Dave's answering laugh seemed to echo in my ears. Then I could date her sister. My sister, Emily, who Mark had always claimed was too intense for his taste. My husband laughed, that familiar staccato sound now sinister rather than endearing. You've always had a thing for Emily. Can you blame me? Sarah's nice and all, but Emily's got that spark. I must have made some small sound, a gasp or whimper, because both men suddenly looked toward the window. I ducked below the sill, heart hammering so loudly I was certain they could hear it. Did you see something? Dave asked. Probably just a raccoon, Mark replied. They're always getting into the trash bins. I crouched there, barely breathing as they resumed their conversation, now discussing something about a client's portfolio. The words washed over me without meaning. My mind replayed those horrifying sentences on a loop. If she disappeared, her insurance could fix everything. Then I could date her sister. My legs trembled as I carefully backed away from the cabin. 1 step. 2. 3. The darkness enveloped me, hiding my retreat. When I reached a safe distance, I turned and hurried to the rental car, no longer concerned about the noise of my footsteps. Inside the car, I sat motionless, key in the ignition but engine silent. Tears blurred my vision. Was it a joke? Had to be a joke. The kind of dark, inappropriate humor that men sometimes shared when they thought no women were listening. Mark wouldn't actually want me to disappear. Would he? Images flashed through my mind, Mark insisting I increase my life insurance last year. His sudden interest in my teaching conference schedule. The camping trip last summer where I'd nearly fallen from that cliff edge with Mark standing just behind me. I started the car and drove away, lights still off until I reached the main road. Only then did I allow myself to sob, shoulders shaking as I navigated the dark mountain road. 12 hours in the air. 3 airport delays. And at the end of it all, a truth I never wanted to discover. My phone buzzed with a text message. Emily, did you surprise him yet? Let me know you're safe. I couldn't answer. Didn't know what to say. The road ahead blurred through my tears as I drove away from the cabin, away from the man I thought I knew, into an uncertain night. I don't remember driving down most of that mountain road. My body operated on autopilot while my mind replayed those words over and over. The rental car's dashboard clock read 12:17 a.m. as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white against the black plastic. Each curve brought a fresh wave of nausea. If she disappeared, her insurance could fix everything. Then I could date her sister. I pulled over at a scenic overlook, unable to continue. Through the windshield, the valley below was just a vast darkness peppered with distant pinpoints of light. Small towns or isolated homes where people slept peacefully, unaware that someone's world was collapsing just up the mountain. The headlights illuminated a small wooden sign. Pine Valley Overlook, elevation 6,240 feet. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I fumbled with my phone, the bright screen momentarily blinding in the darkness. Emily's text still waited for a response. Did you surprise him yet? Let me know you're safe. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not when Dave's comment about dating her was still ringing in my ears. What would that do to her? Emily and I had been close our whole lives. She'd never particularly liked Mark, but she'd been supportive of our marriage anyway. As long as he makes you happy, she'd said at our wedding, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. With trembling fingers I typed a response. Change of plans. Flight delays made me too late. Staying at a hotel tonight. We'll call tomorrow. I set the phone down and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stem the tears that wouldn't stop flowing. My wedding ring caught the light from the dashboard. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of building a life with someone I thought I knew. A tap on my window nearly sent me through the roof of the car. A flashlight beam hit my face and I squinted against the glare. Behind it, I could make out the outline of a park ranger's hat. I rolled down the window trying to compose myself. Everything okay, ma'am? The ranger was a woman, maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes and weather-lined skin. Her name tag read Peterson. Yes, I lied automatically. Just taking a break from driving. She lowered the flashlight and her expression softened when she saw my tear-streaked face. This overlook closes at sunset. Not safe to be parked here after dark. There's a motel about 15 miles down the road if you need a place to stop. Thank you, I managed. I'll head there now. She hesitated, then added, whatever it is, honey, it'll look different in the morning light. Trust me on that. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and started the engine again. In my rearview mirror, I watched her return to her truck, the beam of her flashlight bobbing in the darkness. I doubted very much that morning light would change what I'd heard, but I appreciated her kindness all the same. The Pine Valley Motel appeared like a mirage after what seemed like hours of driving, though the clock told me it had only been 20 minutes. The neon vacancy sign flickered erratically, casting alternating red and blue shadows across the parking lot. It was the kind of place I would normally drive past without a second glance. A single-story row of rooms with peeling paint and doors that had seen better decades. But at 1 a.m. with no other options in sight, it looked like the Ritz-Carlton. The night manager barely looked up from his dog-eared paperback when I entered the office. A small television in the corner played an old western with the volume turned low. The air smelled of cigarettes and pine-scented cleaner. Need a room, I said, my voice hoarse. He set down his book, a Louis L'Amour novel with a cracked spine, and pushed a registration card across the worn counter. $45. Cash or card? I handed over my credit card, then paused. Would Mark see the charge? We had separate accounts but shared access for emergencies and major purchases. The last thing I needed was for him to know where I was. Actually, I'll pay cash, I said, digging through my purse for my emergency money. I handed over 3 20s and waited while he made change from an ancient metal cash register. Room 8. End of the row. Ice machine's broken, vending still works. Checkouts at 11. He dropped a key attached to a large plastic diamond-shaped fob into my palm without making eye contact. Room 8 was exactly what I expected. Faded floral bedspread, wood-paneled walls. A bathroom so small you could brush your teeth while showering. But it was clean, and the door had both a deadbolt and a chain lock, which I immediately secured. I sat on the edge of the bed, my suitcase still by the door where I'd dropped it. The silence pressed in around me, broken only by the occasional passing car on the highway and the hum of the ancient air conditioner beneath the window. For the first time since overhearing Mark's words, I had space to think. Had I misunderstood? Could it have been a terrible joke? Mark sometimes had a dark sense of humor that I didn't always appreciate. Maybe this was just another example, tasteless, hurtful but not actually sinister. But the memory of his laugh after mentioning my insurance policy made my stomach clench. There had been something cold in it, something calculating that I'd never heard before. And then there was the comment about money they'd lost. What money? As far as I knew, our finances were in good shape. Mark handled most of it as the financial advisor in the family, but he always assured me we were doing well. Was that a lie too? I reached for my laptop in my carry-on bag and powered it up. The motel advertised free Wi-Fi, though the signal strength left much to be desired. While waiting for it to connect, I called my school's principal, grateful for the 3-hour time difference that meant it was only 10 p.m. in California. Janet? It's Sarah Kelly. Sarah? Is everything all right? How was the conference? I swallowed hard. The conference ended early, but I've had some personal issues come up. I need to extend my leave for a few days. There was a pause on the other end. The substitute is available through Friday. Would that be enough time? Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. Take care of yourself, Sarah. Your 5th period class made you a thank you poster for arranging the Science Museum field trip. It'll be waiting in your classroom. The simple kindness of her words nearly broke me again. My students. My classroom. The normal life I had just hours ago. After hanging up, I finally connected to the motel's sluggish Wi-Fi and logged into our joint online banking portal. Mark had set it up years ago, giving me the password with a casual, in case you ever need to check anything. I rarely did, trusting him to manage our finances. The interface loaded slowly. I scrolled through recent transactions looking for anything unusual. Nothing jumped out immediately, just the regular bills, groceries, and a few dining charges from places I recognized. Then I tried accessing our investment accounts. The password I had didn't work. When had he changed it? I tried several variations with no success. Finally, I checked our insurance policies. We'd set them up shortly after getting married. Basic life insurance through my school district for me, and a separate policy for Mark through his company. Standard stuff. Except it wasn't standard anymore. My policy had been updated 6 months ago, the coverage amount doubled. I had no memory of authorizing this change. My hands began shaking again. I closed the laptop and pushed it away. The clock on the nightstand read 2:43 a.m. I should have been exhausted after my travel marathon, but adrenaline kept me wide awake. I paced the small room, mind racing through possibilities and plans. I couldn't go home, not yet. Not until I understood what was happening. But I couldn't stay in this motel indefinitely either. Emily. I could go to Emily's. She had a spare bedroom in her apartment and she'd let me stay, no questions asked. But that would mean telling her what I'd heard, including Dave's comment about dating her. The thought made me sick. I took out my phone and stared at Mark's contact information. My thumb hovered over the call button. What would I even say? Hi honey, just checking if you're planning to kill me for the insurance money? Instead, I opened our text thread and typed a message as casual as I could make it. Conference ended early, but I've decided to extend my trip a few days. San Diego is beautiful this time of year. Hope you're having fun with Dave. I hit send, then immediately turned off my phone. I couldn't bear to see his response, whatever it might be. The shower in the tiny bathroom had surprisingly good pressure. I stood under the hot spray until my skin turned pink, as if I could wash away what I'd heard. The complimentary soap smelled like artificial lemons, and the towel was thin and scratchy against my skin, but the routine of bathing gave me a moment of normalcy. Wrapped in the motel's threadbare robe, I sat cross-legged on the bed and pulled out the notepad and pen from the nightstand drawer. I needed to think methodically like I taught my students to approach problems. At the top of the page I wrote, "What I know," and underlined it twice. 1. Mark joked about me disappearing and insurance money fixing everything. 2. Insurance policy doubled 6 months ago without my knowledge. 3. They lost money somehow. 4. Dave wants to date Emily. On the next page, what I need to know. 1. Was it really just a joke? 2. What money did they lose? 3. Why increase my insurance? 4. Is Mark in financial trouble? The third page, next steps. 1. Stay somewhere safe. 2. Check all financial accounts. 3. Talk to Emily carefully. 4. Don't let Mark know I heard him. I stared at the pages, the neat lists at odds with the chaos in my mind. The methodical approach helped, though. It gave me something concrete to focus on besides the sick feeling in my stomach. Outside my window, a car pulled into the parking lot, its headlights briefly illuminating my room through the thin curtains. Voices murmured, a door slammed, then silence returned. I looked at the wedding photo on my phone wallpaper. Mark and me on a beach in Hawaii, sunburned and smiling. I'd thought we were happy. Had I been wrong all along or had something changed? When did my husband start seeing me as a financial asset rather than a partner? The wedding photo stared back, offering no answers. Dawn was breaking when I finally lay down, fully dressed on top of the bedspread. I didn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion finally won over anxiety. My last thought before drifting off was of Ranger Peterson's words. It'll look different in the morning light. She was right, but not in the way she meant. In the harsh morning light streaming through the motel's thin curtains, my situation didn't look better. It looked clearer. The shock had worn off enough for determination to take its place. I didn't know if my husband actually wished me harm or if he'd just made a terrible joke. But either way, I knew one thing for certain as I gathered my belongings and prepared to check out. I needed answers and I needed to protect myself while getting them. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but I would find it. One step at a time. The drive to Emily's apartment complex took 3 hours. I stopped twice. Once for gas at a station with a broken credit card reader that forced me to go inside and pay cash, and once at a roadside diner where I ordered coffee and toast that I barely touched. The waitress, a woman with faded blonde hair and kind eyes, kept refilling my cup without asking. When she brought my check, she patted my hand and said, "Whatever he did, honey, it ain't worth those dark circles under your eyes." I left her a $20 tip. The GPS guided me into Springfield, where Emily had moved 2 years ago for her job at an accounting firm. Her complex was one of those newer buildings with a fancy name, the Parkview Residences. Though there wasn't a park in sight, just a small courtyard with a few struggling maple trees. I sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes rehearsing what to say. How much should I tell her? Emily had never been Mark's biggest fan, always claiming he was too slick for her taste. If I told her everything, she'd want me to leave him immediately. But what if I was overreacting? What if it really was just a tasteless joke? My phone chimed with a text. "Mark, glad you're enjoying San Diego. Weather's great here too. Dave says hi." The casual message sent a chill through me. He had no idea I'd been at the cabin. No idea what I'd heard. I needed to keep it that way until I figured out what was really going on. I texted back, "Having a great time. Conference crowd mostly left, so I'm just relaxing now." Before I could lose my nerve, I called Emily. "Sarah? Aren't you supposed to be surprising Mark today?" Emily answered on the second ring. "Change of plans," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Actually, I'm in your parking lot. Can I come up?" "What? You're here? Now?" Her voice rose in pitch. "Of course. I'm in 3B. The elevator smelled like someone's takeout Indian food. I watched the floor numbers illuminate one by one, wondering how my life had unraveled so completely in less than 24 hours. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, Emily was already waiting in the hallway, her expression a mixture of concern and confusion. "Sarah, what on earth?" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw my face. Without another word, she pulled me into a tight hug. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed that hug until I felt my composure crumbling within it. Emily guided me into her apartment and closed the door behind us before I completely broke down. "It's okay," she murmured, stroking my hair like she used to when we were little and I'd scraped a knee or lost a favorite toy. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." Between sobs, I told her a partial version of the truth. That I'd gone to surprise Mark at the cabin. That I'd overheard something disturbing. That I needed a place to stay while I sorted things out. "What exactly did you hear?" Emily asked, her voice gentle but insistent. I hesitated. "I heard him joking with Dave about me disappearing. About my life insurance fixing their problems." Emily's face darkened. "That son of a..." "But I don't know if he meant it," I interrupted quickly. "It could have been a terrible joke. I don't want to jump to conclusions." I didn't mention Dave's comment about dating Emily. She didn't need that burden. "You're staying here," Emily declared. It wasn't a question. "The spare room is yours for as long as you need it." "Does Mark know you heard him?" I shook my head. "I left before they saw me. He thinks I'm still in San Diego." "Good." Emily nodded firmly. "Let's keep it that way until we figure out what's going on." The spare bedroom in Emily's apartment was small but cozy, decorated in soothing blues and grays. A desk by the window overlooked the parking lot. It would do. Emily insisted I rest while she went to the store for supplies, which apparently meant enough groceries to withstand a minor apocalypse. I lay down on the neatly made guest bed, intending just to close my eyes for a moment. I woke to evening shadows stretching across the room and the smell of tomato sauce and garlic. Emily was making her specialty, baked ziti with 3 kinds of cheese, comfort food from our childhood. "Feel any better?" she asked when I wandered into the kitchen, hair disheveled from sleep. "A little," I admitted. "Thanks for letting me crash here." As if there was ever a question. She handed me a glass of red wine. "Now let's talk strategy. What's your plan?" I took a sip of wine before answering. "I need to find out what Mark meant. What money they lost. Why he increased my insurance policy without telling me." "You could just ask him," Emily suggested, but her tone made it clear she didn't think much of that idea. "Not yet," I said. "Not until I know more." We ate dinner at her small kitchen table, the conversation carefully steered away from Mark. Emily told me about her promotion at work, about the cooking class she'd started taking on Thursday nights, about the neighbor's cat that sometimes visited her balcony. Normal things. Safe things. By the time we'd finished the ziti and half a bottle of wine, I almost felt like myself again. Almost. That night, I crafted a careful text to Mark. "Having dinner with some teachers from the conference. Might extend trip through the weekend if that's okay? Really enjoying the break." His reply came quickly. "Of course, babe. Take all the time you need. Miss you." I stared at those last 2 words until my vision blurred. Did he miss me? Or my insurance policy? The next morning, I called Diane Morris, a fellow teacher and probably my closest friend at Lincoln Middle School. Diane was the kind of friend who would help you bury a body without asking questions. Not that I needed that particular service, but her discretion was what I valued now. "Sarah. How's San Diego? Bringing us back any souvenirs?" Her cheerful voice was like a lifeline to my normal life. "Actually, I'm not in San Diego anymore," I said. "I need your help, Diane, but I need you to keep this between us." There was an immediate shift in her tone. "What do you need?" I explained that I was dealing with a personal situation and needed someone I could trust to collect my mail and check on my house occasionally without Mark knowing. "Are you in trouble?" she asked bluntly. "Do you need more than just mail collection?" "I'm safe," I assured her. "Just gathering information right now." "Well, you've got my help, no questions asked. But when you're ready for questions, I'll have plenty." "It's a deal," I promised. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began systematically going through our shared cloud storage. Mark kept most of his work files there. He claimed it was more convenient than carrying physical documents between meetings. I'd rarely looked at them before, trusting that financial advisory documents would be as boring as they sounded. Most of them were exactly that: spreadsheets, client presentations, market analyses. But in a folder labeled Legacy Planning, I found something odd. A list of clients, all women, all with substantial life insurance policies. Next to each name was a note: potential adjustment followed by a dollar amount. My name was on the list. A knock at the bedroom door made me jump. "Sarah." Emily called. "There's someone here you might want to talk to." Confused, I closed my laptop and went to the living room. A woman about my age stood awkwardly by the door, clutching a handbag. She had curly red hair and nervous eyes that didn't quite meet mine. "This is Melissa Bernhard," Emily explained. "She works at Ferguson Financial." The name of Mark's firm. "Melissa reached out to me through LinkedIn last month," Emily continued. "She had some concerns about certain practices at the company." Melissa's grip on her handbag tightened. "I'm an administrative assistant. I process the paperwork for clients, including insurance policies." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "Some things didn't seem right. When I mentioned it to my supervisor, I was told to mind my own business. So I started looking into client files on my own." "What did you find?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "A pattern," she said simply. "Certain advisors, including your husband, targeting specific types of clients. Mostly women with stable incomes and few family connections. Recommending unusually large insurance policies." Emily touched my arm gently. "When Melissa told me about this last month, I didn't connect it to Mark right away. But after what you told me yesterday..." The room seemed to tilt slightly. I sank onto the couch. "You think he's been doing this systematically? To multiple women?" Melissa nodded. "I brought copies of some documents. Nothing confidential, just publicly filed information that showed the pattern." She opened her bag and handed me a folder. Inside were insurance policy summaries for a dozen women, including me. All had been dramatically increased in the past year. "I could lose my job for this," Melissa said quietly. "But if something happened to one of these women..." I reached for her hand. "Thank you for taking that risk." After Melissa left, Emily and I spent hours going through the documents. The pattern was undeniable and deeply disturbing. "We should go to the police," Emily insisted. "With what?" I countered. "Increased insurance policies aren't illegal. Neither are tasteless jokes. We need more." That afternoon, I called Peter Holloway, a financial advisor Emily had recommended. Unlike Mark, Peter specialized in helping women understand their finances after divorce or widowhood. His office was small but welcoming, with plants in the windows and comfortable chairs. "I need to understand exactly what's in my name," I explained without going into details about why. "And I need to protect my assets without alerting my husband." Peter didn't ask for explanations. Instead, he methodically walked me through options, helping me set up separate accounts and transfer a portion of my savings. Not enough to raise alarms, but enough to give me a financial cushion. "Whatever's happening," he said as our meeting concluded, "remember that information is power. Know what you have, know what you're entitled to, and document everything." Back at Emily's apartment, I created a new email account and began documenting every suspicious thing I'd discovered. Dates, times, exact wording of conversations. The increased insurance policy. The list of women clients. That evening, I sent Mark another casual text about San Diego, mentioning specific beaches and restaurants I'd found online to make my fictional extended vacation believable. His response was a selfie from the cabin showing him and Dave holding up fishing rods. "Catching dinner. Wish you were here." The familiar smile, the casual pose. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my husband's face. How had I never seen behind that mask? "You're getting good at this," Emily commented, watching me text him. "The whole fake vacation thing." "Middle school teachers are excellent at spotting lies," I replied. "Turns out we're not bad at telling them either." Days passed in this strange new routine. I'd wake up in Emily's spare bedroom, momentarily disoriented before reality crashed back. During the day, I'd investigate Mark's finances, consult with Peter, and craft my careful text messages maintaining the San Diego fiction. My friends from school formed an unexpected support network. Diane kept an eye on my house and collected my mail. Karen, our school librarian, helped me research financial fraud cases. Beth, who taught next door to my classroom, simply texted me stupid memes every day to make me laugh when nothing seemed funny. None of them knew the full story, just that I needed help and discretion. They delivered both without hesitation. By the end of the week, I had a clearer picture of what might be happening and a tentative plan for protecting myself. But I still had no definitive proof that Mark intended anything beyond a terrible joke. Then I found the documents in our shared cloud storage that changed everything. The documents were hidden in a subfolder labeled Market Research 2023. The kind of boring title designed to discourage closer inspection. I almost skipped over it myself, but something made me click through. Inside were spreadsheets with client names, policy amounts, and notes that made my blood run cold. Helen Warner. Husband fishing accident? Policy issues if suspicious. Diane Mercer, hiking enthusiast. Policy double Jan, potential fall location noted. And then my own name. Sarah Kelly, summer cabin trip. Cliff trail option, natural causes scenario preferred. I stared at the screen, unable to move, barely able to breathe. This wasn't a joke. This was a plan. My husband, the man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years, had been considering how to end my life and make it look like an accident. My fingers hovered over my phone. I should call the police. Right now. But would they believe me? These notes were vague enough to be explained away as client risk assessments, something a financial advisor might legitimately create. I needed more evidence. Emily. I called, my voice shaking. Emily appeared in the doorway, concern written across her face. What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, I said, turning the laptop so she could see. I found plans. She scanned the screen, her expression shifting from concern to horror. Sarah, this is... She trailed off, unable to find the right words. A murder plan, I finished for her. Or at least the beginnings of one. We need to call the police. I shook my head. Not yet. He could claim these are just risk assessments for insurance clients. We need something more concrete. Emily paced the small room. So what's the plan? Wait until he actually tries something. No, I said firmly. We investigate. Quietly. If Mark's been planning this with Dave, there might be more evidence out there. And I think we should try to find some of these other women too. The next morning I reached out to Detective Sandra Martinez. She wasn't officially on the case because there wasn't officially a case yet, but she came recommended by one of the teachers at my school whose sister had gone through a similar situation. Detective Martinez specialized in financial crimes and domestic abuse cases. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop several towns over from where Mark and I lived. What you're describing is concerning, she said after I'd shown her copies of what I'd found. Her voice was measured, professional, but her dark eyes were kind. But proving intent is difficult. These notes could be explained away as insurance risk assessments. That's what I was afraid of, I admitted. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. What we need is corroboration. Other evidence that suggests your husband was actually planning something, not just making professional notes. Like what? Communications with his friend Dave about these plans. Purchases that might indicate preparation. Unusual tools, materials, or information searches. Evidence of other suspicious accidents involving his clients. She paused. Has he reached out to you about coming home soon? I checked my phone. He's texted every day. Casual, normal messages. Yesterday he asked when I was planning to come back from San Diego. Good. Keep that going. Don't give him any reason to think you suspect anything. I left the meeting with a plan. Detective Martinez couldn't officially investigate yet, but she gave me guidelines on what kind of evidence might be helpful and how to document it properly. That afternoon I started searching for Helen Warner and Diane Mercer, the other women mentioned in Mark's notes. Finding them wasn't difficult. Helen was a kindergarten teacher in a town about 30 miles away, and Diane worked as a nurse at the regional hospital. Both were Mark's clients. Both had recently increased their life insurance policies. Both had husbands who were outdoor enthusiasts. Neither had experienced any accidents yet. I debated how to approach them. A direct call seemed too risky. What if they mentioned it to Mark? But I needed to warn them somehow. Emily suggested a different approach. What if I reach out as a financial auditor? Say I'm reviewing files and notice some irregularities in their policies. You could lose your job for impersonating an auditor, I pointed out. Worth it if it saves a life, she replied simply. In the end we compromised. Emily called both women, introducing herself truthfully as the sister of another client, expressing concerns about certain policy recommendations. She was vague enough to avoid implicating Mark directly but specific enough to put them on alert. While Emily made those calls, I focused on Dave. Mark's friend since college, Dave had always struck me as harmless, A bit immature perhaps, but not dangerous. Now I wondered if I'd misjudged him as badly as I had Mark. Finding information on Dave proved trickier. He wasn't on social media much, and his job as a freelance graphic designer meant he didn't have the same paper trail as someone with traditional employment. But I remembered he had a website for his design business, and website registrations are public information. A few searches later, I had his home address and phone number. More importantly, I found records of a business he and Mark had formed together 2 years ago, Mountain View Investments LLC. According to the business registration, they were equal partners in a venture that was supposed to invest in vacation properties. This was new information. Mark had never mentioned forming a business with Dave. I shared my findings with Detective Martinez, who promised to look into the business records. LLC filings are public, she explained. I can check what properties they purchased, if any, and what happened to them. 3 days later, she called with an update. Mountain View Investments purchased 2 properties. Both were sold at significant losses within a year. Your husband and his friend are about $200,000 in debt from these failed investments. The pieces were starting to fit together. The money they'd lost. The desperate need for cash. The life insurance policies. Is that enough to prove intent? I asked hopefully. Not on its own, she admitted. But it establishes motive. Keep digging. My next step was risky but necessary. I needed to access Mark's personal email. We had shared our passwords early in our marriage. A gesture of trust that seemed laughably naive now. I hoped he hadn't changed his. He had, of course. But the password hint was "our special place," likely referring to the restaurant where he proposed. I tried the name. No luck. The street address? Still nothing. Then I remembered Mark had always called it Sea Haven because of its ocean view, though that wasn't the restaurant's actual name. I typed Sea Haven and held my breath. The account opened. Most of the emails were mundane, work communications, Amazon order confirmations, newsletters he never read. But in a folder labeled Property Ideas, I found exchanges between Mark and Dave dating back months. The cabin location is perfect, Dave had written in January. Isolated, dangerous terrain nearby, spotty cell service. Natural causes would be easiest to arrange. Mark's reply made me physically ill. Insurance requires 2 years for suicide exclusion to expire, but accidents are covered immediately. New policy in place as of December. Timeline needs to allow for proper distance from policy change. They were discussing my death as casually as one might discuss a business transaction, which I realized with growing horror was exactly what it was to them. I forwarded these emails to myself and to Detective Martinez before carefully marking them as unread in Mark's account. Then I logged out, hands shaking so badly I could barely use the trackpad. Emily found me sitting on the bathroom floor an hour later, staring blankly at the wall. "Sarah? What happened?" I couldn't speak, just handed her my phone with the emails displayed. She read in silence, her face paling. "This is it," she said finally. "This is the proof. We need to call Detective Martinez right now." Martinez agreed. "These emails establish clear intent. I can take this to the district attorney today. But I need you to come in and make a formal statement." The police station was nothing like the bright, modern buildings shown on TV crime shows. It was a brick structure from the 1970s with flickering fluorescent lights and worn linoleum floors. Detective Martinez met me in a small interview room that smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning supplies. For 2 hours I recounted everything. The overheard conversation at the cabin, the discovery of the increased insurance policy, the suspicious documents and emails. Martinez recorded my statement and collected copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. "What happens now?" I asked when we'd finished. "How we build the case," she explained. "I'll interview Helen Warner and Diane Mercer to see if they can provide additional evidence. We'll subpoena the official records from the insurance companies and Mountain View Investments. And we'll need to bring your husband in for questioning." A wave of panic washed over me. "He'll know I'm on to him then." Martinez nodded. "Which is why we need to make sure you're safe. Do you have somewhere to stay where he wouldn't think to look for you?" I thought of Emily's apartment. The first place Mark would check once he knew I was back from my fictional San Diego trip. "My friend Diane has a lakeside cabin about 2 hours from here," I said. "Mark doesn't know about it." "Perfect. I'll arrange for an officer to escort you there." Pack whatever you need for at least a week. Don't use credit cards or make calls from your regular phone once you're there. The reality of the situation hit me anew. I was going into hiding from my own husband. The man who'd vowed to love and protect me was now someone I needed protection from. As I left the station, Martinez touched my arm. Sarah, I've worked cases like this before. The hardest part for victims is accepting that the person they loved is capable of this level of deception. It's not your fault. You couldn't have known. Her words were meant to comfort, but they opened a fresh wound. How could I not have known? Were there signs I'd missed? Red flags I'd ignored? Had I been willfully blind to the truth about Mark? I thought of all the times he'd insisted on taking out adequate insurance. The hiking trip last summer when he'd encouraged me to stand near that crumbling cliff edge for a photo. The casual way he'd mentioned how tragic it was when his client's wife had fallen down the stairs at home. Such a simple accident with such permanent consequences, he'd said. Had those been rehearsals? Tests to see how far he could go? Back at Emily's apartment, I packed a small bag with essentials while she made calls to arrange coverage for her work. She'd insisted on coming with me to the cabin, refusing to hear any arguments about putting her own safety at risk. He mentioned dating me, remember? She said grimly. I'm already involved. Besides, you shouldn't be alone right now. As we prepared to leave, my phone chimed with a text from Mark. Hey babe, when are you coming home? Missing you. I showed it to Emily, who scowled at the screen. The nerve of that. I need to answer normally, I interrupted. Detective Martinez said not to raise suspicions. I typed back, probably this weekend. Having such a good time but running out of clean clothes. Miss you too. His response came quickly. Great. I'll plan a special dinner Sunday. Love you. I turned off the phone without replying. The words love you, once so precious, now felt like another weapon in his arsenal of deception. Officer Wilson arrived to escort us to Diane's cabin. He was young but professional, explaining that he would follow our car and remain nearby for the first 24 hours until other arrangements could be made. As we drove away from Emily's apartment, I watched the familiar landmarks of the city recede in the rearview mirror. I was leaving behind not just a physical place but the life I had built and the future I had planned. Ahead lay uncertainty, investigation, and eventually confrontation. I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew I had no choice. The deeper deception had been unveiled. Now I had to face the truth, and the man who had been planning my death. Diane's cabin was nothing like the one Mark and I had rented. Where that place had been designed for tourists with its artificial rustic charm, this was a genuine family retreat, small, slightly weathered, and filled with mismatched furniture collected over decades. Pictures of Diane's family adorned the walls. Fishing trips, campfires, 3 generations smiling by the lake. Emily and I arrived just as the sun was setting. Officer Wilson helped us bring in our bags, checked the perimeter of the property, and explained that another officer would relieve him in the morning. Detective Martinez asked me to give you this, he said, handing me a small black device. It's a burner phone. Her number is programmed in. Use it instead of your regular cell. After he left to take up his position at the end of the gravel driveway, Emily and I settled into the quiet cabin. The unfamiliar creaks and groans of the old structure kept me on edge. Every rustle outside sounded like footsteps approaching. Try to get some sleep, Emily suggested, though she looked as exhausted as I felt. Tomorrow will be a big day. But sleep proved elusive. I lay on the narrow twin bed in what had once been a child's room, judging by the faded NASA posters still taped to the wall, and stared at the ceiling. How had my life unraveled so completely in just 2 weeks? I'd gone from being a middle school science teacher with a seemingly normal marriage to a woman in hiding, gathering evidence against her would-be murderer husband. The burner phone chirped with a text at 7:13 the next morning. Detective Martinez, bringing M in for questioning today. Stay put. We'll update. I showed Emily the message over coffee brewed in an ancient percolator we'd found in the kitchen. What do you think he'll say? She asked, hands wrapped around her mug. He'll deny everything, I replied, staring into my coffee as if it might contain answers. He'll say the emails were just theoretical discussions. That the notes were risk assessments. That I'm overreacting. Emily's expression hardened. Let him try. The evidence speaks for itself. We spent the morning trying to distract ourselves, cleaning the already clean cabin, taking a brief walk along the lakeshore with Officer Peterson, who had replaced Wilson at dawn, attempting to read books we'd found on the shelves. Every hour that passed without an update stretched my nerves tighter. Just after noon, the burner phone rang. Sarah. Detective Martinez's voice sounded strained. We brought your husband in this morning. He denied everything as expected. Claimed the emails were just dark humor between friends. Said the notes were legitimate risk assessments for insurance purposes. My heart sank. So you had to let him go? No, she said, and something in her tone made me sit up straighter. While we were questioning him, we received a call from his sister. Jessica. I hadn't thought about Mark's younger sister in days. They weren't particularly close. She lived in Boston and worked for a publishing company, visiting only on major holidays. Yes. He was quite upset. Said she'd found something in your house that you needed to see. She's insisting on speaking with you. A chill ran through me. What did she find? She wouldn't say not to us. Said she would only discuss it with you directly. She's at the station now. I hesitated. Jessica and I had always gotten along well enough, but she was still Mark's sister. What if this was some sort of trap? As if reading my thoughts, Martinez added, We've vetted her story. She flew in yesterday, used her spare key to your house this morning. Our officers observed her entering and exiting. Whatever she found appears genuine, and she seems truly distraught. Okay, I said finally. Put her on. There was a shuffling sound, then Jessica's voice came through, thick with tears. Sarah? Oh God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. A sob broke through her words. Jessica, what's going on? What did you find? I came to check on the house, she said, trying to compose herself. Mark texted saying you were extending your trip, and he asked if I could water the plants since he was going to be away on business for a few days. This was news to me. Mark hadn't mentioned any business trip in his texts. I used my key, Jessica continued. Everything seemed normal at first. I watered the plants, picked up the mail. Then I noticed Mark's office door was open. He's always so particular about keeping it closed. She paused, and I could hear her struggling to maintain composure. I wasn't snooping, I swear. But there was a notebook open on his desk. A black leather one. I thought it might be important work stuff he'd forgotten, so I looked at it, thinking I'd call and let him know. My pulse quickened. What was in the notebook? Plans, Sarah. Detailed plans. Sketches of the hiking trail near your cabin. Notes about currents in the lake. A list of items, rope, weights, something called untraceable sedatives. And dates. Next month's dates with your name and final resolution written beside them. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Even with all I'd discovered, some part of me had been clinging to the possibility that I was misinterpreting things. That Mark wasn't actually planning to kill me. That tiny hope died with Jessica's words. There's more, she continued, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. There were pages about other women too. Names I didn't recognize. And one had a check mark next to it with the word, completed. My blood ran cold. Completed. Detective Martinez took the phone back. We're looking into that name now. A Catherine Weber. She was a client of your husband's whose husband reported her missing 3 months ago after she failed to return from a solo hiking trip. Her body was never found. I felt physically ill. This wasn't just about me anymore. Another woman might already have fallen victim to Mark's schemes. Jessica found something else too, Martinez continued. A second phone. Prepaid like this one. The texts on it were between your husband and Dave, discussing specific details that corroborate everything we suspected. Is this enough? I asked, hardly daring to hope. Can you arrest him now? We already have. He's being processed as we speak. We're bringing Dave in too. Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. I sat down heavily on Diane's worn sofa, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Emily, who had been listening intently to my side of the conversation, sat beside me and took my hand. There's something else you should know, Martinez added. Jessica's pretty broken up about all this. She's asking to see you. Says she needs to apologize in person. Apologize for what? I think that's something she wants to tell you herself. After hanging up, I relayed the conversation to Emily. Her expression shifted from shock to anger to relief and back again. So it's over? She asked. They're both in custody? Looks that way, I said, still trying to process everything. Martinez says they're being charged with conspiracy and attempted murder. And they're investigating a possible connection to an actual disappearance. Emily shuddered. God, Sarah. You could have been next. The reality of how close I'd come to becoming a statistic, another missing woman whose body might never be found, hit me all at once. I bent forward, suddenly struggling to breathe. Hey, Emily said softly, rubbing circles on my back. You're safe. You stopped him. You're okay. But was I? Would I ever feel safe again? Would I ever trust again? Officer Peterson drove us back to the city the next morning. The police station was busier than before, phones ringing constantly, officers moving purposefully through the halls. Detective Martinez met us in the same interview room where I'd given my statement. Dave confessed, she said without preamble. Turned on your husband completely. Claims it was all Mark's idea, that he just went along with it because of the money they owed. Do you believe him? I asked. Martinez shrugged. Partially. The evidence suggests your husband was the primary planner, but Dave was fully on board. They're both facing serious charges. And Catherine Weber? A shadow crossed her face. We found her hiking boots and backpack in a storage unit rented under Dave's name. The investigation is ongoing, but it doesn't look good. She led us to another room where Jessica was waiting. Mark's sister looked terrible, eyes red-rimmed from crying, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, hands fidgeting with a tissue she'd shredded to pieces. She stood when she saw me, then seemed uncertain whether to approach. Sarah, Her voice broke. It's okay, I said, though nothing about this situation was remotely okay. You helped stop him. You did the right thing. But I should have known, she insisted, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Looking back, there were signs. Comments he made about insurance payouts. Questions about how accidents are investigated. I thought it was just part of his job, but I should have realized something was wrong. I understood her guilt all too well. Hadn't I been asking myself the same questions? What signs had I missed? What red flags had I dismissed? We both wanted to see the best in him, I said gently. That's not a failing, Jessica. That's being human. She nodded, though she didn't look convinced. There's something else. Something I need to tell you. She glanced at Emily, who stood protectively at my side. It's about your sister. Emily tensed. What about me? Dave never wanted to date you, Jessica said, wiping at her tears. That was just part of their cover story. If Sarah disappeared, Dave was supposed to comfort you, get close to you. Not because he was interested, but because you might ask questions about Sarah's disappearance. They needed someone to manage you, make sure you didn't push for more investigation. The calculated cruelty of it, planning not just my death but how to manipulate my grieving sister afterward, left me speechless with rage. When does Mark's bail hearing happen? Emily asked, her voice tight with anger. There won't be one, Martinez said, joining us again. The judge denied bail based on flight risk and the nature of the charges. Both Mark and Dave will remain in custody until trial. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of legal meetings, evidence reviews, and painful conversations. I filed for divorce. I changed my name. I sold our house and moved to a new town where I could take a teaching position at a different school. Emily came with me, at least temporarily. Just until you're settled, she insisted, though we both knew it was as much for her healing as for mine. The trial wouldn't happen for months, possibly even a year. The prosecutors were building a meticulous case, especially as they investigated Catherine Weber's disappearance more thoroughly. You don't have to attend every day of the trial, my victim advocate assured me. Your deposition and the evidence speak for themselves. But I knew I would be there. I needed to look Mark in the eye as the truth was laid bare. Not for closure. I doubted such a thing existed after betrayal of this magnitude, but for my own accountability to the truth. On the 3-month anniversary of my fateful trip to the cabin, I sat on the porch of my new house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Emily brought out 2 glasses of wine and settled into the chair beside me. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. And to listening to that little voice inside that tells us when something isn't right. We sat in companionable silence as darkness fell, fireflies beginning to blink in the yard. I wasn't okay yet, not completely. The nightmares still came. Trust still felt like a foreign language I was struggling to relearn. But I was safe. I was alive. And I had stopped a predator who might have gone on to hurt others. Sometimes, when the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm me, I remembered Ranger Peterson's words from that night on the mountain. It'll look different in the morning light. She had been right, though not in the way she meant. The morning light hadn't softened the betrayal or made it easier to bear. Instead, it had illuminated everything clearly, allowing me to see the danger and take action. Dawn was still my favorite time of day, a reminder that no matter how dark the night, light always returns. And with it comes the strength to face whatever waits in the new day.